Hello, my friends. Happy Sunday. So good to see you. You guys had a great week? I sure hope so. Hey, we are in week 3 of our study of the book of Exodus. So we had Genesis last spring, right? Now we're in Exodus. And the story of Exodus talks a lot about one guy. Do you guys remember who it was? Moses, right. All right. And we are fast forwarding through this story really fast because we started with Moses as just a baby. Do you remember that? And do you remember how his mom protected him and how God, his mother, his sister Miriam, and the princess all loved and cared for him? If you don't remember that, go back and watch that TVC Kids Nashville on YouTube. And then last week we talked about Moses as a 40-year-old having to run away from Egypt, and he ran to the land of Midian. And so if you missed that story with the 7 sisters around the well, go back and look at that one too. He got married. He had 2 kids, and that's where we are at today. Are you ready? Me too. Here we go. I'm going to read it to you out of this one by Catherine Voss. And I love, I tell you guys this a lot, I know, but it took her a long time to write this children's Bible. And it kind of reminded me of Moses. It was a long time he had to wait out alone with God. And so that's where we're in our story. Moses was no longer an Egyptian prince, dressed in fine clothes and living in a palace, with servants to take care of him. For many years he was, you guys remember? He was a shepherd, right? Yes, wandering in a lonely desert, from one green place to another, and sleeping under the stars at night. It was a very lonely life in that desert country where there was very little grass. So think about all those sheep. And he had to go from one place to another just looking for grass enough. All right, that was nothing like being a prince, was it? No. All right. He would go from grassy land to grassy land with his flock. It is sometimes a good thing for people to be alone and by themselves. We talked about that last week, didn't we? It gives them time to think about God. Yeah, did you guys spend some time just by yourself thinking about God this week? That was our assignment last week, right? Spend some time with just God. All right. We're moving on now. One day Moses saw a very strange sight in the desert. It was a bush, and it was on fire. Moses watched it for a long time, but the bush did not burn up. So I decided to sit in front of a flowering bush today. So if you're out and you see a bush that's blooming, right? That looks pretty normal, but he saw a bush that was on fire and probably thought, oh no, that poor bush is going to burn up. But just like this bush, if I check it later tonight, it's going to be still blooming. That bush was still burning, and it kept burning and did not burn out. Now, it doesn't take a bush very long to burn out, so that was very surprising to Moses. Would you have been curious? Yeah, so is he. Moses said to himself, I will go and see this great sight, why the bush is not burning up. When Moses came near the bush, something still even stranger happened. Ready? God called out to him. Moses, Moses. Moses was surprised, and he answered, Here I am. What would you have thought? He was like, who's calling from a bush that's burning? God said, Do not come any nearer. Take off your shoes, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. So he's like, wait, this is God. If this land is holy, that means this is God talking to me. In that country, it is still the custom for people who go into a church or into a synagogue, a holy place, they take off their shoes, much like a lot of gentlemen will take off their hats when they go into church here, right? So Moses took off his shoes just as God commanded him. Always good to listen to what God says, right? Yeah, all right. In those days, the Bible had not yet been written. Fathers and mothers had to tell their children about God and how he had spoken to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Do you guys remember those from Genesis, right? All right. They had to tell them all about the promises of God and how he had promised to send a Savior. Right? They knew Jesus was coming eventually. And how they must always trust, not in themselves, but in God's promises. I'm going to say that one more time. The mamas and dads, they would teach their children that they had to trust in God and trust in his promises, not trust in themselves. That is so easy to say and so hard to do sometimes, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later too. They said to their children, "Always remember that we are not like the Egyptians who worship the sun and all kinds of animals. We are Israelites, and we worship the one true God who made the heaven and the earth." All right? Same with us, right? We worship the one true God who created all of creation. All right. God says to Moses, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob." Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. God said, "I have seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry. I know their sorrow. I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians." So remember, the Israelites were being treated as slaves by the Egyptians. And so God said, "I've heard them. I've heard my people, and I am ready to be done with that, and I'm going to deliver them. Come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people out of Egypt." Moses said, "Wait, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" He was a little nervous, wasn't he? God promised, "I will certainly be with you." So isn't that an awesome promise? When you know you have to do something that's hard to do, God is there saying, "I promise I will be with you." Awesome, right? "And this shall be a sign to you. When you have brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain." All right, so he's telling them something is going to happen after Moses is done what God's asking him to do. It's going to be a special thing, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. But he's saying, I've chosen you, Moses, and I want you to go, and I want you to talk to Pharaoh and tell him that I want my people free. All right, Moses, not so sure about that. Moses did not want to go. Perhaps he was afraid of Pharaoh. I could see why, but perhaps he was afraid he was not strong enough or wise enough to go and lead God's people. But was God asking him to do it on his own? No. He said, "I will be with you." But still, sometimes we as people, we get nervous, don't we? We have to know that we can trust God. If he's given us a job to do, we have to trust him to help us do it. But Moses, he was still nervous. He kept thinking of excuses. Do we think of excuses sometimes? Yeah, we do. He said, "The Israelites will not believe that the Lord has appeared to me." He's like, "They're not going to believe me. That's why I don't think I could do it." Then the Lord asked, "What is that in your hand?" And Moses says, "It's a rod." So it was kind of like a walking stick, right? He said, "Throw it to the ground." And when he threw it to the ground, it turned into a big snake. And then God said to Moses, "Grab it by the tail." Moses was like, "Well, I guess if he could turn my rod into a snake, he could keep the snake from biting me." So he grabbed it by the tail, and when he grabbed it by the tail, it turned back into a rod. And Moses was still a little bit afraid. He said, if he could keep a snake from biting me, then he could turn it to a rod again. Then he said, "Put your hand on your chest." And he put his hand on his chest under his cloak, and when he brought it out, it was all like dead and ashen looking. It's called leprosy. You've probably heard of that before. But that's when your skin is dying. And he looked at it, and he was in shock. He was like, "Oh no." And God said, "Put it back, Moses." And he put it back into his cloak, and he pulled it out, and it was clean. It was healed. So God was giving Moses two signs that he could show the people. Because the people, they knew Moses, and they may not believe him right off the bat. But God was giving him signs so the people would believe that he did have a message from God. All right, let's see where we're back at here again. "Now," said the Lord, "I've given you two signs. If they do not believe the first, they will believe the second. If they do not believe that, then take some water and pour it on the dry land, and it will become blood." So God was giving him all kinds of tools, right? His toolbox was full. He had stuff. So Moses did not want to go still. He said, "Oh, my Lord, but I cannot speak very well. I'm slow in speech." Then the Lord said, "Who made man's mouth?" He's like, Moses, I know who you are. I made you. I made your very mouth. I know who you are, and I'm asking you to do this. But Moses was still nervous. Was it not I, said the Lord, who made your mouth? Now go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what you shall say. But Moses objected. He said, oh, my Lord, send somebody else. Please send somebody else. Now God was getting a little angry with Moses, which I truly understand. He's given him all kinds of stuff, right? But he said, I know your brother Aaron can speak. Tell him what I want to have told. Let him do the speaking. So here's Moses having all kinds of excuses. Do you guys ever have excuses? But no, Mom, I don't want to do it. Dad, I don't want to do it. I'm too nervous. I can remember being like that. I sometimes could be like that today. But God said, first off, I will be with you. Second off, here's all your tools. There's the rod that will turn to a snake. There's your hand that will be sick and then heal again. There's the water that will turn to blood. You have all these signs, all these things that will help the people know that I have sent you, that God has sent you. And most of all, he said, I will be with you. Now, what does it take for us to trust God? I was thinking about that and thinking about how sometimes it may take a lifetime for us to totally trust God, how we still have to work on that every day. And so I thought, what helps me to remember to trust God? And what helps me is to look at the blessings around me. Look at the things that God is already doing in my life and take notice of them. When the sun comes up in the morning, do you take notice that God made that happen? When the flowers behind me bloom, do you take notice that God made that happen? When you're able to take your first breath in the morning, do you notice that God made that happen? That you have a wonderful mom and dad, you have friends, that God put those people in your life? When you are able to walk and run and play in health, do you know that's because God created your body able to do that? Look out, see creation, see the blessings that God has put into your life, and notice the presence of God in your life daily, every day, all day. Start practicing noticing those things. And I think that as you notice those things and as you assign them the proper presence, that's God doing those things in your life, and you start seeing that those are blessings, you'll be able to trust God even more. Knowing that it's not in our own strength, but it's in the strength of God, that we could do anything. I love that God said to Moses, who made that mouth? I made that. I know you can do it. But sometimes it takes a little bit more, right? So go out there today, go out there tomorrow, this week. Notice the things that God has put in your life. The beautiful creation, the way he created you, the people he put around you, the beautiful blessings. Notice the presence of God. And that will help you trust God even more. All right, you guys, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week with another wonderful story from Exodus.